Hi, folks, and welcome to the Sovereign AI Industry Advisor for the month of August 2026. My name is Bill Wong, and I'll be your host, and we'll be unpacking a number of sovereign AI stories that occurred last month. So let's get started. The first story we'll cover will be the U.S. administration's AI oversight framework and the concerns many have of how that was produced. Next, we'll get an update from the EU with Article 50 now taking into effect, and then back to the US and Wall Street with Nvidia leading a partnership that is creating this pool of $500 billion to be available to pursue things like sovereign AI. Back again to Europe to get an update on their compute infrastructure, and then down under to Australia and talk about their concerns with the AI vendors and their motivations for sovereign AI. Then up to South Korea, where we'll talk about their latest large-scale initiative. Then over to the UK to talk about their latest set of funding for local unicorn. And then finally, my backyard in Canada, an update on Buzz HPC. So with that, let's start with the US. So on August 3rd and 4th, they communicated to the public that its voluntary framework was completed, and that date was really part of their executive order that they announced earlier this year. The concerns with the framework is that it was really done behind closed doors. Only a handful of the AI vendors were involved. Now, I guess the term voluntary is really applies to the fact that they're not going to introduce this as legislation. So I guess that's the good part. However, the critics would say that because it's voluntary, it really doesn't amount to anything. Nobody really needs to comply to it. There's no penalties, etc. And aside from that, the other really major concern is effectively what they've done is created a kill switch. Again, what they did last month with Mythos is they can, based on their interpretation of what's safe or not, say, hey, nobody can get access to these models, which is a big concern. And, well, without exception, I think countries really don't want to work in an environment where a partner is doing everything closed doors, not collaborating, etc. So this only fuels the drive for sovereign AI. To counter that, a totally opposite way of producing regulations is the EU, which is very participatory. And on August 2nd, the transparency obligations came to effect. So organizations, whether you're a builder of AI or you're a consumer of AI, deploying it, you have a set of obligations here. Actually, there are 4 obligations, 2 for providers, 2 for deployers. The ones for providers is they have to communicate that anybody using your system, that they know they're talking to an AI system. And that you also have to communicate that if you generate content using AI, that's also made aware to the user. For deployers, they also have to disclose if any biometrics or emotional recognition technology is being used, as well as if any content has been created using AI, like let's say a publisher and they want to write all their books using AI. That fact has to be shared. Now, This is just the first in terms of the set of regulations that came to effect. As you see down in the analyst insights here, uh, more deadlines, more obligations are being pushed out there, uh, all driven for trying to make these systems more safe to use. The next story is really a game changer in terms of financing. So NVIDIA partnered here on August 10th. They announced partnerships with Apollo, BlackRock, Blackstone, etc., the pillars of Wall Street, to make available funds so that they treat uh, data centers or the financing of data centers kind of like, as they put it, analogy is like mortgages on a house. And effectively, what this does, it helps take all this funding that NVIDIA is providing, it shifts it over to third parties, so it keeps it off their balance sheet. They're quite happy, um, but it does kind of resemble a little bit of the circular financing we've seen NVIDIA introduce, where suppliers are funding the entities that are buying their hardware. So there are some concern here, and folks are slowly watching this carefully. Moving back to the EU, and the EU has a compute infrastructure. The article that I've highlighted here on the right, 19 AI factories are out there already with 13 satellite, what they call factory antennas. So this announcement states that 7 what they call gigafactories are going to be uh, uh, opened, I guess, and they can house up to 100,000 plus GPUs. So these are big systems here. And what the EU is also pointing out here is that the funds to do this uh, isn't necessarily all going to be public funding, that they're going to get the private sector involved here too. And they make a big point out of that. And moving down to Australia, and one of the more prolific, I guess, ministers is telling the public that, hey, we could be paying up to $40 billion to the hyperscalers and the major AI vendors within a decade. And so he says that at this point that the growth is 20 to 40% every quarter what they're paying out. So the concern that he and many uh, have down in Australia is that they believe that if this continues, that Australia is going to become a large, how does he put it, importer of intelligence, and argues that the economic value of AI is really going to go offshore to the organizations like Nvidia, Anthropic, OpenAI, uh, all predominantly in Silicon Valley. Now, while he calls out this as a concern, um, the um, the concern other people have as well is, okay, your counter to that is sovereign AI, but this is a very, very expensive venture as well. So that I think is a challenge for all countries pursuing sovereign AI. Yes, you get that uh, level, I guess, more control over your fate, but it does come at a cost, huge financial outlays, and you're kind of in the hardware business, and you're buying this every 2 or 3 years. Moving up to South Korea, as mentioned before in our monthly update, South Korea has this plan to become number 3, which is that title probably goes to the UK today. And their latest grand initiative is this 18.4 gigawatt uh, data center or AI factory, a huge one. They've announced 12 of their key technology partners. And what they've also called out is what they believe the key risk factor or bottleneck is going to be access to power. So to get electricity to flow, um, I guess, without bottlenecks and optimized for an AI factory. Going to the UK, and the UK has a sovereign AI fund, which they have used for a number of local startups, and some of these startups actually have their parents, funny enough, in the US, but this one is born and bred in the UK, called Olix. And what they use is photonics, light, to transmit data. So can't get faster than that. And the the end game, or is the big picture, is that this is a viable competitor in the future to what Nvidia is offering. Back in my backyard, Canada. So Hive Buzz, if you haven't heard from them, is a player for sovereign AI in Canada. And today they govern about 400 megawatts here of Tier 3 data center capacity. And Tier 3 data center capacity, what that is data centers with redundancy built in, so you have something to fail over. And yeah, I guess the odd thing I found about it was that their big client that wanted and needed this provided $350 million cloud service agreement, they didn't want to be made public at this time, which is kind of interesting. And my guess would be, I guess, the political climate today on data centers isn't the best, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it's that name has not been disclosed at this time. So that's the concludes our roundup. The big stories, regulations from the U.S. and the EU, the funds being made through the Nvidia partnerships are probably the biggest stories that we saw this month. Thanks, and have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.